Welcome to Reimagining the PLC. I'm Kristy Ennis, and I hope that you got a chance to download the handouts. If you didn't, I'm going to send out the link to those along with the recording if you're registered for the webinar. So check out our website. I'll share that with you at the end as a resource, and you can sign up there on the webinars page to get the handouts, and they have hot links so that you can access some of the resources that I mentioned. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the PowerPoint. Well, Google Slides. Same thing, right? So, first of all, as I said, I'm Kristy Ennis. If you haven't met me before, I am a college English instructor, but also finishing up my doctorate currently at Murray State University in English pedagogy. I was a high school teacher for 8.5 years, and actually I'm currently a high school teacher because I have reimagined my PLC, but I'll explain that a little bit later. I offer tutoring at the college level for athletes. I write curriculum, so I have my hands in all kinds of things. I left the classroom a couple of years ago to take a district position to coach teachers, and found that incredibly difficult in a large district, but something that I really liked, so that's kind of how I landed here. This is my personal Twitter handle. I'll share the one for Spark Ed. We're trying to build that, so I would really appreciate it if you would follow both of us. I post things, inspirational things, resources, shout outs to great, amazing things that I see teachers doing all over the country when I travel and consult. And I also really love to get people together to expand their, I call it EduTribe. It's really, really important when you think about re-examining your PLC practices and thinking about how it can't be limited, really, to the four walls that your school presents to you. Your classroom, your school, even your district or state. The PLC can extend beyond that, and I would rather call it an EduTribe because PLCs have kind of gotten a bad name in the last couple of years if people have had a bad experience or an unproductive experience. So I'll get into that as we move ahead. I just wanted to introduce myself if you hadn't met me before. So why am I presenting this information? I think it's important for you to understand how I arrived at the need to do sort of a re-examination of my own PLC. As I left the classroom into a leadership role, I was still employed in the same district that I had taught in, and all of a sudden I had no PLC, which I never thought I would hate, by the way. I'm one of those people who can shut my classroom door and feel completely fine. And I'm also quite self-aware, so I'm happy to ask for help when I need it. But for the most part, I had always felt that PLC work was compliance for me. Something that was required by my principal, overseen by my assistant principals, and I had to turn in minutes and common assessments and at times present information to the faculty about the work we were doing. And I had been trained, let's be clear, by Solution Tree, so I really understood the purpose of PLCs and how they should support a teacher's growth and produce positive student results academically and potentially even non-academically. But what I found was I was in a really at-risk high school for 8.5 years, and we went through whole school turnaround with restaffing and new admins. And it really became a hoop to jump through when we just wanted to do what we knew was best for kids. And I understand that not every teacher does that, and that not every teacher knows how to use data to inform instruction. So please don't mistake me. PLCs in their theory, in their background, in their original intention, as with most things, are great. The structures are great. The resources are great. Solution Tree is fantastic, and the support they provide to teachers in schools. But what happened for me and why I decided I needed to reimagine that is when I left the classroom, I didn't have one anymore. And in my district, they were trying to come up with the structure for like book studies, regular support type meetings for people in teacher leadership roles like I was, because there were a fair amount of us across the district, 50 or 60 in different content grade areas, minimum. There were probably more than that. Problem was we could never all get together. We didn't have common planning. We were all over different locations, and we didn't have any shared data other than district assessment data to drive our work. So I said to myself, you know what, I've got to get some support as a new leader. So I actually looked into a couple of things. One, I am a nationally board certified teacher, so I sought out other nationally board certified teachers who had taken teacher leadership or administrative roles and became more active on Twitter and engaging in leadership chats like TLAP or Lead by Example. There are lots of ways to do that. But I still didn't have any of that face-to-face, even if it was virtual interaction, that I felt was helping me grow as a new leader. So I went to my national professional organization, the National Council of Teachers of English. I'm involved in the state level on the board and our affiliate, KCTE, but I needed a reason to regularly meet, to discuss problems I was facing and get suggestions on how I could improve outcomes for me, my teachers, the teachers I was serving, and ultimately their students. So that's the reason I came to this need to reimagine the PLC. Both as a teacher, I knew it needed to be done, but I felt a little powerless to change it, and then as a new leader. So the first thing I did, I took a page out of the book of the Center for Teaching Quality, which in Kentucky, a lot of nationally board certified teachers work with the Center for Teaching Quality to examine my problems of practice through a newly formed cohort with NCTE's Emerging Leaders program. I got a mentor who was also a teacher leader. I had a small group of other teacher leaders, and we had regular monthly meetings using this platform, a webinar platform, to discuss our problems of practice. Our time is valuable, so our leader was sort of in charge of organizing the whole thing, making sure we could all attend, and then sticking to our time limits, which part of PLC work is norming, so we did that to respect everyone's time. And then also, we really just sometimes needed a sounding board, but more importantly, we needed inspiration and some ideas for innovation, because the students that we served, either directly as teachers, I was still am a college instructor, but also the students that the people we coached and mentored, affected and worked with regularly. So just in the last webinar, this rework graphic really sort of defines the relationship piece and the reflection piece that we had to think about when we were deciding how to come up with norms for our new PLC of teacher leaders, and what we really needed. We had to decide, do we have this already or do we need to build this? The same is true if you're going to reimagine a PLC that you have absolutely no control over in a school setting, meaning your principal says, you are going to meet with these 5 people every couple of weeks on this day at this time to look at data, plan common instruction, plan common assessments, and make adjustments based on the data. So if you have that situation and have no control, or if you have mine where you have complete control, or you're somewhere in between, The first step is going to be to examine the problems that you individually are facing, and then also decide what do you have already as far as the dynamic and what do you need. So if you're looking for an assessment tool, this is a really good one. So psychological safety is the first one. I've done some independent research for my doctoral work about this, and so much less than people's qualifications or their years of experience or their content knowledge. Members on a team, specifically educators that work on teams, really need to feel safe to take risks and to be vulnerable in front of each other. That's number one. So if you don't feel that, and first of all, you have to be really brutally honest with each other and with yourselves if you're reassessing the dynamics in your PLCs, because it won't benefit anybody if you lie, right? So you have to be really brutally honest. Be kind, but be honest. So the second one is dependability. We've got to be able to depend on each other to do equal amounts of work, or to agree to distribute the work according to our strengths, time, availability, and so forth. It doesn't have to be equal as long as everyone agrees to the roles and responsibilities. So that has to be done on the front end, and it has to be revisited frequently, especially in a situation where you have a PLC that you have no choice about who's involved. The third one, structure and clarity. I am not a person who loves an agenda. It feels forced to me. It feels very inorganic. And some of the most amazing, creative, innovative things that I've ever participated in, groups, projects, even meetings, that horrible word, have come from a lack of defined structure. That being said, you have to have specific time. Sometimes you don't even have control over that. You have to be sure that you have roles and at least a goal, which I'll talk about determining what that is in a second. But structure for you might look like a very detailed agenda where you have 5 minutes for each person to talk. You have 10 minutes to brainstorm. You have 5 minutes for data planning. It's really specific to you and your needs and your personalities, but it's definitely something that you need to consider if you're assessing the effectiveness of your PLC structure. And then fourth, you've got to figure out why this means something to you. So for me, it was very clear because I had been a part of dysfunctional PLCs. I didn't have one. That's why I was looking for one. I needed support in my new role as a leader. But it meant something to me because I wanted to be the best coach that I could be. I wanted to find ways to personally grow, even though I didn't have anyone checking on me or evaluating my performance. I work for myself now, so I have to evaluate my own performance so I can grow and be better. But when I was in a PLC at a school, I think the meaning of the PLC got lost because it was required to meet with these people that I didn't choose to be in my group, right? So you have to determine what is the meaning of this work. And if you've lost that meaning, that might actually need to be higher up the list. The fifth one is the impact. So you have to believe that the work you're doing is going to impact positive change. So one of the things you have to decide is what really is our zone of impact, right? It's like your zone of genius. Once you determine what everybody has to bring to the table and you divide up roles according to strengths, you've really got to decide, like, what is a realistic impact we can have here? Because it seems like schools and administrators and districts tend to set your goals so far out of reach, seemingly. I mean, we all want every kid in our class to succeed academically, or be promoted to the next grade, or not to fail, or to meet whatever testing benchmarks they need. But what's a realistic impact that you can really get behind philosophically? If you don't have that why, it is not going to work. Or it will be very shallow at best. So if you use these 5 steps to consider where you are now, evaluate that, reflect on that individually, and then come together to share what you think about these things before you move into deciding how you can reformulate your PLC work. I think that really will help a lot. I know it helped for me, and it does continue to help as I coach people who are in this situation. So a free tool, feel free to use it however you want, but I think that has helped me. For me, a PLC, this is what I mean by that, because we have international teachers on this webinar. We have people across the country who may have different definitions. So to me, this is a data-driven community of educators who plan collaboratively instruction. They use assessment to plan backwards, so assessment outcomes, but they also are very focused on drilling down to essential skills. They have very clear alignment on scoring of student work. So multiple choice is easy to do that with, and not very informative of what kids can do, what they know and can do. But writing assessment or assessment of presentation, oral skills is really different, and it can be very subjective. So you really got to make sure that you determine criteria together for scoring. What equals a pass or proficiency or A, however you determine success, mastery. And you've got to constantly realign by calibrating. And that's something that should be done in the PLC. And it's something I never got to do because my PLC members were terrified to show other people their student work. And that was because number one on this list was not in place. So also, we have to capitalize on the strengths of the group, and I mentioned that when you're reassessing or reflecting on the current dynamics in your PLCs. Not everybody is comfortable designing multiple choice or feel confident in their ability to do that, but other people are really, really good at it. So, or have track record of great, success in developing assessment items. Cool, take that. And then I'm going to look at reading assessment that's non-multiple choice, right? Because that's my area of strength. And then another person in the group is very good at determining mastery criteria for writing skills. So, use each other's strengths. And I'll give you a couple of free tools you can use to determine those strengths. Because those really are less about content, which is the examples I just gave, and more about personality traits, right? So if you're confident that you're good at leadership or achievement, then you need to make sure that your role reflects that instead of the person who is super passive and uncomfortable with conflict, for example. The next part, you've got to reflect regularly and be authentic. That is part of a professional learning community. So, and also with that first psychological safety step, if you are comfortable with each other and willing to take risks because you feel safe being vulnerable, then that piece takes care of itself. The other part of this is a PLC does not just include your grade level partners and content partners. Your PLC can be anyone who shares a similar passion, a problem of practice, who just really inspires you as an educator. It could be a grade level partner. It could be someone in your professional organization, like it was for me, who didn't even live in the same state as me. Especially if you are a singleton in your building. So a lot of times, for example, in my old district, related arts teachers became singletons, and they all got thrown in together. Like the Spanish teacher, the French teacher, the art teacher, and the humanities teacher were all in one PLC. And they did not have common assessments. They did not have common scoring. And they didn't even have common grade level all the time or common planning. So it made PLC work in this way very difficult for them. And those meetings often became a joke and a waste of their time. So sometimes you have to go out into the broader community, either in your district with another teacher that just really you guys have good collaboration, and mojo, if you will. There's this intangible thing, right, about relationships that makes a group work really well, a team work really well. And maybe you have to go outside your building to that, and you might need to advocate to your administrator that he or she give you time to do that. The other part of PLC work, in my definition for purposes of this webinar, is a collective responsibility. These students are, they're ours. They're not mine, they're ours. And so we feel responsibility to help each other. We are not in a competition where one teacher is like, oh, well, my kid scored higher than yours, I win. No, that doesn't do anybody any good. The how. So first of all, and I've already, stopped me. Okay. So first of all, you have to reflect. So how do we do this, right? How do we reimagine the PLC, especially if you're in a situation where your work feels stagnant, compliant, or just another hoop to jump through? Right? So like, how are you going to go about reimagining this? First of all, use that 5-step graphic to reflect on your current dynamics and practices. But this is hyperlinked in the slide deck, and I'll certainly share that with you if you don't have it. But you can also use tools like personality tests, the Myers-Briggs. There's a Myers-Briggs-like one out there that's free. You can use some PLCs at work stuff from Solution Tree that's free to determine what is going on. Like, what is the current status? Think of it as a diagnostic test for your group. I really love StrengthsFinder, which is a Gallup product. So I use, as a business person, I use one of theirs that's linked here. It costs $19.95. I'm not getting any money by endorsing this. Maybe I should. But I really love the way it took my leadership qualities or my personality traits and ranked them in order of sort of my highest aptitudes or qualities, and then gave me action steps for what I could do to work on myself. And then if you share that information with your colleagues, like your highest and your lowest maybe, you can start to determine the roles, because that's another part of that 5-step process, right? Like, what are our strengths, personality-wise, content-wise, skills, and then what are our roles going to be in this group? I don't know that any PLC, unless you went through the process from the ground up, your school really invested in the training, you did all this stuff over the summer, and you've had the same members for the last 5 years. I don't know a whole lot of people in a public school situation who have that luxury, if you will. So you're going to have to take some time to do that. And anytime you get a new member in your PLC, that's really important. You have to remember what I said about constant reflection. You got to do that, friends. Like, it's not going to be the same dynamic if you add a new person. It's just not. Then you're going to have to determine, okay, what are our problems of practice? What is mine as an individual person in this group? What are the problems of practice that we have in our department or our team? And then what really is our zone of influence? What is one thing that we can truly see ourselves changing that is measurable in some way? So a SMART goal, if you want to use that terminology, that we can act on together, and then get together and look at data points, whatever those are. They don't have to be multiple choice scores, to see how we're making progress toward whatever goal that is that we actually think we have a zone of influence to change. We get so caught up in predetermined goals in PLC work, in my experience, that are set for us, that we have no ownership or investment in the process. There is no realistic zone of influence here. So if your goal is set for you, then let's break it down to one step that you can actually make a change with, right? Let's do that. But if you have a wide open choice about what you're doing in your PLC, then go through this process. Determine one thing at a time that you really want to put all of your work into. For me, when I did that as a teacher, because I was the PLC lead, which, by the way, I think that's terrible. There shouldn't be a leader of the PLC. There should be roles that are distributed and decided on by everyone, but a leader makes that a meeting just like any other meeting. And that leader feels more responsibility. I just think that's a terrible idea because I wasn't, and I hated it, and I felt like I had to do everything myself. And it changed the dynamic and the trust, and I really hate it. I felt like a department chair, and I didn't want to be one. So instead, choose the action that you know you guys can get together and do. Choose the zone of influence. And if you've got a goal that was set for you, figure out that one step you can do to actually make it change. And before you get to that part, you really need to figure out, who do you need to help you? Who? Is that an administrator? Like you need to rally for some resources, or you guys need some training, or you need time. Maybe it's not that though. Maybe you just need a bigger group, a bigger edu tribe. You need to extend your PLC outside your building. Maybe you need to engage in a Twitter chat together. Maybe you need to do some online PD like this to examine your practices and get support from a coach. You've got to ask, friends. I don't know anyone who doesn't need help. I really don't. And that's coming from a person who feels completely capable and happy working on her own with the door shut. So I learned that through my work with National Board Certified Teachers in a cohort where we did a similar process and came up with a collective project in small groups with people we had never met before in different content areas, different grades, in different cities in parts of my state. We made amazing progress because we had a very streamlined goal, a few action steps over the course of the year, and we had regular meetings every 2 or 3 weeks to discuss how we were doing this work. So then you can make change, right? Then. And it might be incremental. It might be one little tiny thing that impacts your morale. It might be one big thing, goal that you really just want to meet, like reading proficiency scores. But it might be something in between. So it just depends on what you need and what your group determines is your zone of influence. So what I did was I actually, once I got out of the leadership cohort and became a leader myself in that same structure in the Emerging Leaders program, I work now with a team teacher in a Chicago suburb who was my mentor. We just decided, you know what, we're going to redefine the PLC in a really pretty radical way. And that is, we're going to create our own PLC because he's a department chair. And in his district, that means he teaches one class and then he's administrator for that department, like handling scheduling and complaints and evaluations and all these things I have no desire to do. He does that the rest of the day. So he didn't have a PLC that he met with regularly. He actually not oversaw, but like at least was evaluating teachers who were in their own more traditional PLC structures and department meetings. He leads those. So he didn't have one, yet he wanted to do innovative things in his classroom. And I was like, hey, I don't have a high school classroom anymore, and I need one in order to do my doctoral studies. So why don't we get together and do a PLC and team teach virtually this class? If you saw the blended learning webinar, it was a little more specific about what we're doing with the blended learning approach. But as far as a PLC went, we determined academic skills that we wanted that were essential based on the state standards and considered, you know, what the district requirements were, what the department requirements were, what the grade level requirements were. And then we decided in our classroom, this 9th grade classroom, I don't even live in that state, by the way. We decided what skills were non-negotiable. We wanted to guarantee that every student leaving our classroom would be able to do these things, demonstrate mastery or at least progress toward mastery in each of these things. And then we just decided what is the criteria that will determine whether those students were successful. These are 2 of them that come from the English State Standards. We have 10 total for the school year. We had 8 in the first semester, and we added 2 and kept the other 8 for the second semester. And we did this because we determined our zone of influence right now was this little 9th grade classroom of 28 kids. We decided that we wanted to push honor students who have tested into this level, both with reading and writing skills, who are generally compliant, super nice, grade-driven students. We decided our zone of influence and our problem, if you will, was to push these kids out of that. We needed them to be more creative, to feel free to use their voice, to increase the authentic voice in their writing for authentic, real purposes. We wanted them to push through their own difficulties, because just because they tested into this level doesn't mean they can all do every bit of this work without assistance or work or revision or practice. So we decided we wanted to push on that because they were very used, just like we were in our PLC, very used to just checking off boxes, doing our homework, and getting points for effort. And we had no idea what they can do, what they are able to do, or what they know based on a traditional grade-driven system. So we determined these together. We determined our roles. They had to be very, very clear, because that he is the teacher of record, and he is there 5 days a week with those kids, once a day. I, on the other hand, run my own business. I'm a consultant. I'm a doctoral student. So we had to decide, like, what are you going to do? What am I going to do? And then how often are we going to reflect, change if needed, address the needs of the students, and what's that going to look like logistically? So we determined all of that to create our own PLC. And we co-created units. We are co-facilitating instruction, and we give regular feedback to the students together. We have the students copy both of us on every email, which might sound overwhelming, but we just remember we only have 28 students. We watch they do Flipgrid reflections. We use Google Docs and Drives to facilitate everything, including feedback. And something that we have to continually look at is, why is it that our team, this PLC we've reimagined, what makes that successful? So I've been also doing research, both outside research and my own action research, about our work and this new reimagined idea of what a PLC is. That is completely up to us. We have complete autonomy to make choices. And then how might that apply to people who have a much less free option on how they decide what a PLC work is going to be for them, or what a PLC is going to look like for them? And what we decided was, we've got to get away, or what I decided was, we've got to get away from that term PLC. Just like a lot of educational jargon, that has become like a dirty acronym. It has a negative connotation to so many people. And that's sad, because the idea of it is really good, and it has done amazing things for a lot of teachers and students. But instead, it's a team, y'all. It's the same as a team on a business, in a business. It's the same as a team of any professionals that's either required to get together or chooses to get together to share responsibility, to help each other out, support each other, and ultimately, if they're successful, get better outcomes. So here's some of the research. I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm happy to provide it to you if you want to look at it further, into what makes a team successful. What are the dynamics that make a team successful based on years and years of research? This is the most recent research, but I have looked at stuff way back into the 60s about, way back, that's not that far, but into the 60s, about team teaching, about teams and business. And guys, this stuff has not changed, okay? This is based on willingness to share, comfort and trust of the group, like-minded members, training and support, and a real desire to innovate, or to at least have an inquiry mindset. So if you want more about this as you try to work on this, or if you want even some coaching, I'll explain how you can get some more resources from me, but I just wanted to show you that it really comes down to the success of this work if you are redesigning your PLC into a successful team, because that's what you want it to be. There's a lot of research that can help you, and it is very, very simple. Again, I'm just click happy today. All right, so building your tribe is really the first step, especially if you do not feel you have a lot of choice in how you can change your PLC, or if you have toxic members who are not willing to do this work with you. Sometimes you have to say, you know what, I'm going to just go through the motions for that PLC because I have to, because it's part of my job, and I'm going to do the best I can do to not kill everyone in that group and myself. But you can create your own PLC, because sometimes you need that. And trust me, I know you don't have time. You don't want extra work. It's not like work. I'm not getting paid for this work I do in that 9th grade classroom. Yes, I'm using it for my doctoral work, but it is not paid and is not additional. It is additional, rather, to everything else I got going on. I could say tomorrow, you know what, I give up. This is a lot of work. But instead, I am doing exponentially more work than I have to, because I love the work, and I have seen amazing results in these students, and we are getting positive feedback from parents who are a product of a system that is not what we're using, who don't understand standards-based or skills-based grading. So what I suggest is, if you cannot, or even if you can, rely on your own existing PLC structure or your team, widen that. Build your edu tribe. This is what keeps teachers teaching, okay? This is what makes you want to go to work tomorrow. Because as much as we want to believe it's the students, some days it's the students that make us want to sit in our car and cry and turn in our papers for non-renewal. Sometimes it's the things like staying for another meeting that make us want to go work at Target. So that's where I was as a classroom teacher before I became a teacher leader. So what I did is I actually got involved in a cohort of National Board Certified Teachers, because I am one. I got more active in my content organization. I started from that, going to conferences that were free, like Ed Camps and this ESET organization that Bill and Melinda Gates originally started and funded. And you know what? I just got into leadership cohorts in, my profession. Professionals, I mean, think about it. Doctors are often members of the AMA. If they are specifically surgeons, or say you're a heart surgeon, you might be a member of the American Heart Association. And those people, those organizations support you. You're constantly learning. They are paying to do research that can help you learn and grow. And you just never know what those organizations are going to open up for you as a classroom teacher, or even an administrator, or, if you have a different role in education. Twitter chats are completely free, and you don't even no one is policing you. So you don't have to do the whole thing. You can do it in your pajamas. No one sees you. I travel a lot, so I find that I can successfully engage in those on planes, or, in airports. And then another place where you can reach out and actually find other educators who are doing things that you're really interested in is Curio. A former Kentucky State Teacher of the Year, Ashley Lamb Sinclair, has created that through some amazing grants and initiatives that she's been involved in. And she just won like this amazing Girl Boss grant, scholarship, or whatever you want to call it, to push this further. So check out Curio. There's all these resources, so just take a minute to look at those, particularly if you don't feel you have the strength or the ability or the opportunity to change your existing PLC. And you can talk to me. I'm perfectly happy to help you in this process. I do offer coaching, and I can facilitate the reimagining of your PLC. We can talk about a contract that worked for you and your building. I'm not in the business of becoming a millionaire from this work. And I know that public education doesn't have a lot of funds, but I'm telling you, I will be happy to talk to your administrators or your school board or whatever about, with research to support it, about why investing in this process will help create better teacher happiness and satisfaction, job satisfaction, cut down on complaining and, dynamics between people in these groups and teachers in the building, so that overall helps culture in your building. But ultimately, it positively affects students when you are choosing your zone of influence and seeing progress, tracking progress, and making a change if you're not making progress. I have no problem selling that to your administrators if you want to do this work, but you feel you do not have the support or the wherewithal in your group you have. So just check out the website. You can contact us by filling out an interest form. You can direct message us on Twitter. You can join our Facebook group, but I'm perfectly happy to help you as well. So thanks for joining us today. I hope that you got something from this, that your wheels are spinning, that you have thoughts about how you might apply it to your own work. But get in contact with me, join our Facebook group. Let us know how it's going. We don't have to have a paid contract to keep in touch. So just let me know how it goes. Hope to see you soon.